What's up, Liron here, and this is gonna be my painting for today. What's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another video. I was asked why I use the What's up, Liron here intro. That's just the thing I feel most comfortable with. I may change it one day. I don't know. That's what I got used to. So it's not being disrespectful or anything, hopefully. So here's the painting I'm going to work on today and the scene. My goal with this, I'm outside. I want to paint this very fast. I want to be quick about it, and I want to do the most amount of details with the least amount of actual brush work. Do it very spontaneous, very on the spot, and these kinds of scenes that have a strong contrast in them are a very good opportunity to test this out, because you can just put a first wash that's very light and pale, and then add the shadows, the mid values really quickly, and then add a few just touches of dark values, and you're good to go. So this is my goal here today. I already showed you a quick snippet of the final result, and maybe you've seen it in the thumbnail as well. This is my reference for today, and it's a very interesting, for me at least. You know, a lot of people will find this boring, but that's my taste. As you know me, I love boring cars, boring buildings, as long as the light conditions are interesting. So with that being said, let's get started.
Okay, so I'm starting with something I don't usually show you, which is putting the tape. Now, the reason I decided to show it to you this time is because it is quite important. I had a few weird experiences where the paint just leaked through the tape. And what happened was I got these weird stripes there. So to avoid that from happening, you really have to push the tape through. Okay, now we're way past the tape stage. What you see me do now is drawing, and I'm taking a few steps back and trying to crop, or rather frame, the scene. Because what happens is the part that's easy about painting from photo reference, the part that really makes it simple compared to other endeavors, is that you have a clear frame. And even if you don't have a clear frame, you can always crop the picture the way you want to. When you're looking at the world that's around you, the frame becomes very blurry. You wonder, what should I include in the scene? And sometimes it may not be as obvious. You may decide to include an element that physically isn't there, but it's maybe somewhere nearby, and you want to include it because it will enhance the impression that the viewer gets. You know, there are many reasons to do things. And when you're working outside, you may do things a little differently. So for this reason, it's really important to test out a few crops. You could do this with your phone or an iPad, taking a picture and trying out different crops. I actually take a few steps back and put my both my hands in both L shapes and try to crop the view in between them and try to make it larger, make it smaller, and figure out what I want to express in the scene and what's relevant and what isn't. So in this example, I thought it would be nice to get an L shape with the building and the street. So this is the shape I'm going for. And I'm going to zoom in on the drawing process in just a few moments, so you will hopefully be able to see more of the process up close. And if not, I'm going to show it to you soon after I'm done with this part. But in any case, what I was doing is trying to crop it out. And that really helps in getting the nice composition going. Now, another tip I could give you, and you saw me do this earlier, is use your pencil vertically and horizontally. So sometimes you won't be sure whether a line is... Let's say you won't be sure as for the angle at which a line is. So the line may seem like it's at a 45-degree angle to the ground, or it's not really clear, and the ground may be a little tilted. You know, sometimes there's different leveling. So what you do is you hold the pencil either perfectly horizontally or perfectly vertically, and you compare the line as you see it to that. And that way you can get a more accurate representation of it. Here's the street cleaning squad. It's gonna come, they make a few rounds around the street. And in just a moment, I'm gonna show you the drawing up close, and then we'll continue, okay?
So I want to show you what I've got so far. Here's again my reference. Let me show you. Just a very interesting light situation there. And here's what I've got so far, and I'm going to flip the camera so you can better see. I'm going for a looser style this time, so let me show you. Okay, so here's the building, and here is my painting. Again, very loose this time. I'm not trying to get into too many details because what I want to do is practice allowing the water and paint to do most of the work and not trying to do everything by the drawing. So you see I left a lot of details out. I'm not trying to put everything in, and we'll see how it goes. You know, this is how you evolve. Today I felt like I don't want to do something super detailed, and this is why I'm trying this thing, and we'll see how it goes, and then I learn from this new experience. So let's get started before the light changes on us.
Okay, so continuing, and now I'm starting with the first wash. Now, as I just mentioned, the street cleaning squad is gonna come for an attack soon. They usually, in summertime, they do this at around 4 in the morning. They actually wash the sidewalks. And then there's this small vehicle that sweeps the streets, but now they're doing it a little later. So, and I posted a funny video on Instagram showing that and what happens when you aren't careful. They almost washed away my painting. So in any case, now I'm working on the first wash. Now this is planned to be a rather expressive, impressionistic painting, so I'm not too bothered with the details, and you have hopefully seen me working on quite a few detailed works, and if not, I have a few videos down the pipe to show you of more detailed, slow, measured, careful works. Okay, this isn't one of them. With this one, all I'm trying to achieve, or all I'm seeking, is to just enjoy myself and create a quick impression of what I see, which is what makes this scene a perfect match for that, because the light condition is very clear. There are clear diagonal lines of shadow. Now here I felt I went a little darker, so I just came back with a bunch of water and put it into the paint. Now this is something that, and I've been asked about this a few times recently on Instagram, about how to improve with watercolor painting. And the first thing I said, here's the cleaning squad, the first thing I said was make sure to work a lot on the water to paint ratio. That's the most important ingredient. You want to make sure that you get yourself used to using lots of water, lots of paint, trying out different ratios, testing out what will happen if I drop, like I'm doing now, thick paint onto a wet surface. What will happen if I come back with very wet brush and put it and pour it onto an existing paint? What happens at different levels of wetness when I do that? You know, I may mess it up, I may get backgrounds, I may get an effect that I actually want to achieve. This is something that, quite honestly, I'm not doing enough of, just being very busy, and when I paint, I kind of paint to achieve a final product, and it's something that I do want to work on, okay? Now here comes really the part of painting loosely, and that is, notice how I'm using, first off, this second wash here, I'm going to try and merge everything together as much as possible. Second, I'm making sure I don't go too dark, which was, I guess, a common sticking point for me in the past. I would go way too dark, way too soon. And now at least I found a few ways to alleviate that. And so I'm going in with kind of a grayish mixture. It's a mix of all my primaries. As for the colors, if you're curious, that's phthalo blue. I believe the red is a perylene red, and either perylene or cadmium, but I think that's perylene red. And then we've got the yellow is, which one is it? I don't even remember. I think the yellow is it's definitely a warmer one. So it could be golden by White Nights, though I'm not sure, because I told myself I won't use it as much because it's not light fast. So who knows? But in any case, the colors don't really matter as long as you get, let's say, a trio that works for you and you enjoy working on. So for me, a cool blue together with a warm yellow and red works really well together. I love the way it looks. So I decided to go for that. Now here you see there's this shed on the left, and I got to it. Now I do want to have some highlights on it, so I stopped the dark wash on the left side. Okay, and this is like a break point, and it actually can be used to rest a bit, because when you have to merge all washes, it's really hard. Now for me here, I did want to merge as much as possible just to keep it simple, but I didn't, on the other hand, want it to become a hassle or something I'm worried about. So I'm just having fun at this point, really. So yeah, now I am varying the wash just a little bit. So it is still a mix of my 3 primaries, but every time I try to push it towards one of them. So let's say once I'll go with a bit more blue, like this mix is a little cooler. It has a bit more blue, but if you compare it to the mix on the left, it has more yellow. And now I'm slowly painting under that shed, okay? And it's funny how this painting unfolded, the process, because what happened was I started really with this second layer that's really careful, and I want to merge everything as much as possible, keep the impression very simple and very fun, very loose. And then I just spent a long time bringing out some more details and bringing out the shape of different elements inside the painting. So you'll see that we are going to complete this second wash pretty early into the video, and then we'll move on to bringing out the shape of different elements using the darker values. And thankfully, because I didn't go too dark immediately like I used to in the past, I actually have the time to do that. So now I'm putting in that red doorway that you see here, and doing vertical lines used to be a nightmare for me. It's still quite challenging at times, but now I'm a little better at it. Okay. Now I think I did go a little too dark here next to the balcony, but that's fine. And it's probably going to dry much lighter because it's still a very wet wash. So it's going to be okay. Now this red doorway that I put in here with the windows, the glass windows, it's all going to change. Okay, I'm going to add some more elements to it that will modify it. I'm going to add the color of the glass, the blue there. So things are still open for us to change, especially when you're building it up slowly. Now I'm going pretty bold with the second wash, so it's not like I'm doing 20 layers of glazing. It's something that I just don't enjoy. From time to time I will test it out, but usually I don't enjoy it as much, so I don't do it as much. Now I put this window on the side, and I'm going to come back with thicker paint, and I'm going to put back some thick paint onto it in just a few moments, and that will melt the paint into the wet area. And the good thing about doing it this way, doing wet in wet, is that you get a blurry impression, and things in the shadow tend to be a little blurry and not so clear. And the perfect way to achieve this is using wet in wet, a technique that's very useful. I see these kinds of paintings on Instagram by several artists where they really create a focal point using wet on dry in the foreground and then wet in wet in the background. What amazes me though is they have such a crazy level of control in the wet and wet, and it's really about the timing. It's really about knowing when you're gonna put that paint in. So right now I'm putting, let's say, just an example, a very light wash, and I zoomed in on the reference so you can better see the part I'm working on, and you can see how the red starts to bleed into that. Because I'm coming back with a wetter wash onto a wash that's still wet but is very thick, it moves it around a bit. Not a lot, but a bit. And then it bleeds into it, and it's a nice effect that I was trying to achieve. Now the highlight I left there is for the top part of the trash can. So now I'm doing wet and wet, all of the shadows of the trash can, and later on I'll add a bit more the green trash can, and then I'll add the darker, yet darker areas because the right side of the trash can is a little darker, as you can see. I just wanted to mention that this entire process, except for the drawing part, it's all real time. So I received a lot of feedback about what types of videos you enjoy. And from what I could gather, you like the longer videos. And if the process demands it, then you'd enjoy a longer video. So I'm trying out this slower format, let's say. Now, because the painting process here is not that long, it's still not going to be that long of a video, so probably about 40 minutes. The process itself is like 30 minutes, I think. But the pacing is real time, okay? And let me know what you think of that, the real time processes. I have no problem doing time lapses, even easier for me in some cases. So whatever you want, let me know, and I'll try to do more of that. Now, regarding the right section of the painting, I'm going to do that. I'm going to darken that significantly in just a few moments, just taking care of the building first. There's a psychological trick that I taught myself that you may find useful as well. So what I do is, if something's my focal point, I try and start with that. And the reason why is that when you start painting, you have the most stamina, I like to say, because it can tire you at times. So I like to spend my stamina in the beginning of the painting process on the thing that matters the most. Now, everything is important, of course, but I like to spend it on the thing that matters the most. And then when I'm a little more tired, I'll either take a break or like in this example where you can't really take a break because it's outside and the paint's going to dry and everything, and you don't have time, the light is moving, I will just do the part that's less important later on, so that you're the most focused when you start. Now, if you're like me, this may work for you. If you're wired a little differently, that's fine. Maybe it won't. But just as a quick side note. Now, another thing that I've been asked about quite a lot recently is it's funny because it's a connection of two questions. So the first one is, how do I know which colors to use in the first wash? Because sometimes I go all over. I'll use a bit of red and a little bit of blue and yellow, and they'll all be pure. And I'm just kind of using them to set up the tone, the temperature, the mood of the painting. But people wonder how I can just use whatever paint I want. And then on the other hand, I get a question that says, how do you get the highlights to look so good? So the two are connected, and that's really the job of the first wash. Now you see me, by the way, working on that background I told you. But the job of the first wash, for me, at least in the way I approach this, is to set up the highlights. Because I know that whatever is going to be left of the first wash after the second wash, which is what I'm doing right now, that's going to be the highlight. So right now, the highlight on the building is yellow. It's very yellow and bright and warm. That's because the first wash was yellow. You see the rooftop, the highlight there is red because the first wash was red over there. So the two are connected, and this is how you get your highlights to be interesting as well. And you have to plan forward, just like anything in watercolor. You don't have the luxury of layering an opaque thick paint above whatever you're displeased with. You actually have to make sure that you preserve the highlights wherever necessary. So you actually have to plan ahead. And this is the way I see it, is the first wash is very, very freeing. You just use very wet mixture to make sure that it's as even as it can be. And you can have some leeway when it comes to, you don't have to beat yourself to death working fast to make sure it doesn't dry, and you don't get those weird streaks, which are okay in the first wash, but I like to avoid them. So that's how I like to approach it, and that way you're free to use whichever color you want. I'm only using 3, which make my processes much faster and easier. Now, other people may disagree, and that's fine. Some people may say that the first wash is your chance of putting in as many details as possible. Other people, for example, I tend to cover the whole paper with the first wash. Others will say you're giving up useful highlights. You're giving up the paper white that could be used later on for other things, different approaches. And I'm going to be the first one to try a different approach and learn something new. And so I'm learning new stuff every single day. But that's a part of it, really. The way I came to do things right now, especially when I'm outside and there's a bit of a time pressure, the clock's ticking, is like that. Okay, and I find that way works for me. By the way, I think my phone's on vibrate and maybe it made a bit of noise. Sorry about that. But in any case, that's how it works best for me, and this is why I that's what I can recommend, okay? But I could definitely, that's what I could talk about more. Sorry, not recommend. But then it's your job to try out different things and see what works for you. I actually got a comment on Instagram. Some person was giving me constructive criticism, which I have no problem with, by the way. It was done maybe a bit harshly, but still. Now, I didn't mind the constructive criticism. What I did mind was the fact that he made a few false assumptions of like that I like to bring out a lot of unnecessary and boring information, like cars and, I don't know, buildings. And I'm like, who decides what's boring? I mean, I love cars and I love buildings and I love light and shadow. So that's what I'm going to do, So that's what I'm going to show more of. So yeah, so you can't really make a value judgment on something that's subjective, okay? You could say that my technique is not the best as it could be. You could say right now, totally messed up the sidewalk edge there. But in any case, you could argue that the technique lacks, and I know it lacks in some ways. Of course, I'm still learning, still working on it. But when it comes to what's an interesting reference, what's an interesting view, what's an interesting subject, that you can't really make a value judgment on, in my opinion, I guess you could make anything interesting, which is a comment I get a lot, that people say that I'm trying to do that. And I enjoy it. Now, at this point, we get a pretty good understanding of what we're looking at. And we're almost done with that second wash. That notice how it combines very dark pigment on the right and then the lighter wash on the walls of the building and so on. So now that we're done with that, we can move on really soon to bringing out the let's say the detailed shape of the different elements. So if you look at the rooftop where I'm drawing just now, where I'm painting, you'll see that there's a bit more details than what I put in. So you have a few shadows and then a few other internal highlights. And then it's darker close to the top there. And so there is a lot going on there. And this is what I'm trying to do with this wash. Just bring out more of the details. So and of course add the darker details, because some details are purely darker. They're not different. You just need to darken some spots in some areas. So this is my goal with this wash. Now, this wash or layer, whatever you want to call it, has the potential of being the longest process. And the reason why is because you can just continue on and on and on forever, You could just add more and more information, more, I actually had to stop myself at some point. A, because I was getting tired and I was standing there for a long time, and B, because I just was afraid I'm going to overwork it. So there are a few, you see these boxes next to the shed, or I don't know what it is exactly, above the red doorway with the mini awning. So there are these boxes, and I'm going to add their shadow as well, or unless that's their shadow. So these are the types of details I'll add here, and also bring out the shape of things that require it, like that mini awning, like the window, like the shades of the windows, the blinds, the details on the corner of the balcony also is something I'll need to bring out. The shape of the trash can, the fence. And I'll slowly change, and I'll soon change the reference photo so you can see the area I'm working on better, hopefully. And so, yeah, now it's time to bring out all those details. And it's amazing how just by adding a few darker spots here and there, you get a nice effect. Now, when you're doing this, it's important to remember that watercolor is transparent. So first off, you're going to see the layer underneath. But second is the value compounds. So if you think you need a value that's this dark, you'll probably need to water it down just a little bit because you already have the wash underneath it. And that's if we're talking about you putting the paint where there's already a wash, okay? So if I'm gonna paint an area that's already dark, I'm gonna have to take that into consideration. And this is something I didn't think about. I used to mix my paints on the palette in an absolute manner. I'd look at the reference and I'll say, okay, I need this dark of a value, value. So that's the value I mixed, okay? And even if you take into consideration the fact that the paint dries a little lighter, still, it'd be like, that's as dark as I need it, that's how dark I'm gonna have it. But what I forgot to take into consideration is the fact that there was already a darker wash underneath it. And then I'd get a very dark shadow on top of a mid value, which is something that doesn't work as well, okay? So it's just something I had to struggle with for a while until I understood what I'm doing. And it's so funny, I'm starting to really think about it in a sense of, so I've been doing it for about, I don't know, I started at May 2015, but I really became serious about watercolor around, I think, 2016. So about 16, 17, 18. So about 3 years now, I'd say, of being serious, maybe 4 years. And it's funny because, you know, there's so much more to grow. And a lot of people, they tend to compare themselves to others. I do that all the time. You know, I'm looking at someone else, trying to figure out how long have they been painting, and then try to compare myself. And that's just BS. It doesn't help you in any way. And you never know what type of experience a person is coming into the field with. So for example, I've always been drawing. So drawing comes very naturally to me, and making a good drawing makes a painting much easier and makes it look better. It makes the process easier and it makes the final result look better. So someone that just starts art with watercolor painting, how can they compare their abilities to me? Or let me give you another example. Let's say there's someone who's really like a prodigy. Like he got things really fast, you know. So there are some people with that rare skill. It can happen. And how am I supposed to compare my skills to them? You know, so everyone has their own story, their own background, their own struggles too. So I wouldn't be quick to compare myself to others. I really try to avoid that, and you know, to just be aware of that at the very least. So a lot of people, they compare and they say, okay, you've been doing it for X amount of years and now you're this good. And first off, it takes a lot of work. Now, second, if I look at the masters I aspire to be as good as, they've been doing it for over 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 even years. So I still have a long way to go. When I'll be doing it for 20 or 30 years, that's when I'll start thinking, and hopefully I will do it for 20 or 30 years. But anyway, that's when I'll start thinking about, you know, okay, am I where I want to be? You know, there's just so much to learn. And I think 5, 6, 8 years of doing this, and then you only then start developing a realization of where you are really. And I think on the other hand, it's important to be at least minimally aware of when you're stuck, okay? Because sometimes we can be stuck, and it's okay, it's nothing to panic about, but I think it is important to be able to tell, okay, for the past 6 months or so, I wasn't making any progress, I'm making the same mistakes. And I think the way to unlock these growths of overcoming these, barriers is to try and break your patterns, break your routines. So meaning maybe try for like a few weeks to paint completely differently from what you've been doing so far. You know, it's just this basic rule of if you keep doing what you're doing, you'll keep getting what you're getting. So like break the pattern at all cost. Do whatever it takes to not go over the same pattern. So paint differently, use a different color, use a different brush, use a different medium, use a different paper, do a different reference photo or a different type of subject than you normally do. Sorry about the ambulance, it's a very busy area where I live. So breaking your pattern can be a really good way to break out of that. And I'm not even talking about the creator's block or anything like that. I'm talking more about just not being pleased with the results, okay? So it is important to be patient, but it's also important to realize, okay, I've been doing the same mistake for a while now. It's not just about continuing to do. Maybe I need to actually be smart about something. So that's just one extra pointer I wanted to talk about. Now there is something I didn't talk about at all in this video, and if you notice on the right where the area heavily in shadow To the right of the tree trunk, I put this little car, and there is a car in the reference that you can barely see there on the right. And because this entire area is so well shaded, I'm barely showing the car. I'm hinting at it just by adding a few shadows and also a few highlights or areas I skipped. And I didn't talk about the way I produce these highlights inside the shadow. So what I will do sometimes is I'll negative paint around an area, and then I'll come back with a damp brush and fill it up. That way the wet paint that's very dark will merge into the area with lots of water, and then you'll get a highlight inside the shadow. I hope that makes sense. I could talk more about it. If you want to, let me know. One more thing I want to talk about, which is really important to me, is if you're not following me on Instagram, you should definitely, because you should definitely follow me there, because I'm very active there. I post a lot of my work in progress and just a lot of general updates. I love YouTube, and I'll hopefully always do tutorials here, or if as long as YouTube stays alive, I'll try and do more and more. And here is a better, closer zoomed in view for you. But I do a lot on Instagram too, so I definitely recommend you check it out. Now, another thing, if I missed a comment, or you ask a question and you didn't get a response back, Instagram is the best way to ask me. Okay, so even if you emailed me and you didn't get a response or anything like that, be sure to check it out. My Instagram handle is LironYanIL. There you're guaranteed to get an answer, and if I missed your message there, send me another one. It's just because there are a lot of them, so sometimes I miss them. But I definitely try to get back to everyone that sends me a message there, and I think right now I answered just about any message I get there. So that's LironYanIL, LironYanIL. Definitely very active there. So that's one more thing. So hopefully, so far, this process makes sense to you. You see, I'm not really that scared to use my fingers. Sometimes the paint comes out too bold and too strong and too aggressive, and it can ruin an aspect of the scene. So I will just smear it around a bit. What I'm doing now was really a bet, making this little square darker, and it turned out in my favor. It really worked the way I wanted it to. Actually, I wasn't expecting it. While doing it, I had this voice that says, you've done something similar before a few times and you always messed it up. But for here, it actually worked. By the way, I didn't talk about that entrance on the bottom next to the trash can too much, but you saw me using a bit of a drier brush earlier just to get in the impression that there's depth there and that you can see through the glass, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. And right now I'm strengthening the shadow between these red bars or metal frame in the glass, because there is a bit of shadow there, and strengthening these will bring it out. You see how it makes them pop immediately? So that's really important. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I had relatively a lot of knowledge when it comes to drawing when I started painting, okay? I had a lot to grow back then, and I still have a lot to grow now, especially when it comes to people and portraits and organic shapes. But I had some basic level, and it really is important, and it really does help to have that basis of drawing. And if that's something you're struggling with, I definitely recommend you check out my beginner's drawing course. It's always in the description box. It's pretty cheap, I think. It's like $24, and you get, I think, a very good introduction to drawing using a very simple method that I developed based on what I do. I just reverse engineered the way I approach drawing. From observation and being accurate, because I'm big on actually being accurate. You can do whatever type of art you want. You can be abstract. You can do whatever you want. But I like the ability to draw things accurately, because I like more realism and impressionism. But that's the way I like to do it. So if you feel like you're lacking in that way, I definitely recommend you check it out. I think it will be very helpful, especially if you want to improve in the world of painting, okay? So I'm going to put a link in the description box. It's always there. It's $24. You get like a 30 days money back guarantee if you don't like anything, and you can always email me and ask any questions you want. So I highly recommend you check it out. So now I'm putting in these final touches that you can see on the fences here and there. These are actually shadows cast by some wires and some, again, it felt too strong, so I'm kind of blurring it. Cast from the wires and from the electricity wires, all sorts of things running around the scene. Just final touches. Now here there was a darker spot under the rooftop, so I did want to get that in. And lastly, I think I'm going to add just a few more dark touches there around, yeah, exactly, around, there are these hooks coming out of the wall. So I'm adding the hooks first, and then you're going to see me putting in their shadows as well. I didn't really talk about the materials, so I'm going to do a really quick recap where we have about 2 minutes left to the process. So I'm using right now a Princeton brush, synthetic, that I find to be really good for the smaller details. Now I'm putting in the shadows of the hooks. I've been using my silver black velvet and my Liron brush for the first wash. I've been using Saunders Waterford, the paper, cold press, which is my favorite. I'm using this easel that's really useful, that I enjoy a lot. I have this dirty, super dirty towel on the right. It's probably time for me to replace it. And now I'm using a brush by a brand called American Painter, I believe. A rigger brush. These are good for these kinds of wires and things like that, that I find really helpful. The paints I'm using are really always a mix. So I have some Daniel Smith, I have some Schminke, I have some, I think I also have, I have White Knights in this palette as well. I just like to find the paints, the specific paints I enjoy, put them in my palette. I don't really mind the brand, but if I do have to say a few brands that I really enjoy using, it's definitely Daniel Smith and Schminke. I'm actually really impressed by their paints always. SAA really is on the same level, I would say. I just didn't mention it because I tried only 3 paints, but they were all fantastic. I am gonna try a few more soon, so that'll be nice. I mean, yeah, this is it. I'm really close to finishing this off, just adding a few more wires there in the background. And now I'm adding my signature. Now this is going to take a few moments because it was too bold and strong there. I wasn't sure where to place it, and I didn't want to place it on the right corner because it felt like it will really hurt the composition. I didn't want to put it on the left corner, so that's the spot I found for it. So now I'm smearing it a bit. I didn't want it to be that dominant, and we're done with this process. Let's wrap it up.
So friends, I'm just about done here. Here is the final result. I'm going to flip the camera and show you it in detail. Very pleased with how it turned out, and I think I attained what I aspired to. So here is the final painting. As you can see, I think it's a really good expression of this scene. This could be a good one to develop back at the studio, but overall really pleased with how it turned out. I could maybe kill off some of that highlight, but overall, if you take a few steps back, it actually looks quite realistic and quite, I'd say, a good expression of the scene at hand. I also considered darkening this part of the wall here, just because I wanted it to contrast with the white fence here. Let me show you. So there's this white fence and then this gray part. But then I decided to leave it that way. I could always do it later on, but it didn't feel like it was important enough to do now. So in any case, very happy with the final result. Let's wrap up this video. So friends, I hope you enjoyed this one. I think it's a really good example and goes to show you how when you want to create a lot with just few details, you don't want to go into too much overworking the thing, and also when you work outside, it's really important to do these quick studies. Otherwise, all of the light, everything's going to change right in front of your face, and you won't be able to tell what you're looking at anymore. So I hope the goal here was achieved. I hope this was entertaining to watch at the very least, if not also teaching. Let me know in a comment below what you want to see more of in these videos. I recorded a lot of processes recently. I have a few ones that are that have been done inside, so that I can give you a nice balance of indoors work that's really detailed and very slow and patient, and then work outside like this that's very quick and on the spot. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will talk to you again in another vid real soon. What's up, Liron here. I just finished this painting process and I wanted to give you an up-close look, and then we're gonna take it inside and I'm gonna do the removal of the tape. The last large painting that I finished got like 1,200 likes. That was crazy, so thank you so much.